Before January, there were nearly 1,000 tunnels along the border. Now only 400 are operational. The tunnels have been the targets of deadly, almost daily airstrikes by Israel, which accuses Hamas of using them to smuggle in weapons. While the man we spoke with denied the tunnels are used to bring in weapons, there's no denying that the tunnels serve as Gaza's only conduit to the outside world. They bring in everything required to maintain a semblance of normal life, everything that Israel does not allow in through the crossings. The downside is that the prices are near unaffordable for a majority of Palestinians. Daoud al-Banna owns a grocery store in Rafah.
The stores are full of goods from the tunnels, but at very high prices. Everything coming from the tunnels is very expensive. It's all because of the siege, of course. If there was no siege, the prices would be normal. The price used to be low, everything would be plentiful, and the goods would move off the shelves. Now it's the opposite. This used to be 4 shekels. Now it's 9 shekels.
Abu Ahmad from the Haddad tile factory said that cement in Gaza costs a fortune because it comes from the tunnels.
A bag of cement is about $4 everywhere in the world. We pay about $50 because cement in Gaza comes through the tunnels. We pay about $30 just for entry. Now the whole world wants to raise funds for Gaza, but can the world tell Israel to open the borders and let the goods come in for the people?
A vendor at a wholesale market selling goods straight from the tunnels blamed the high prices on the continuing airstrikes.
Now very few of the tunnels are functional because the Israelis bomb the tunnels every day. Very few workers want to work there now. They're scared. Also, the Egyptians are cracking down on the tunnels bringing goods. Very few people come here to buy things because everything is expensive. They aren't getting salaries, and they just don't have money to buy the goods.
While the tunnels are the only lifeline into Gaza, they also leave Gazans vulnerable to Israeli airstrikes. Muhammad's house is one of the few buildings left standing on the border with Egypt. Armored Caterpillar bulldozers demolished most of the other homes over 5 years ago, between 2000 and 2004. Tunnels now surround Muhammad, and an airstrike in early January damaged half her home.
There's been no truce. There's bombing every day. Just this morning, they bombed this tunnel. Yesterday here. Day before yesterday, there. Every day it's a new place. Every day there's an attack. We've had to run out into the streets each time they attack. Once at 1 in the morning, once at noon, once the middle of the afternoon. Every day, day after day.
She pointed out another tunnel beside her house that she feared would be the next target.
There's pros and cons to the tunnels. On the negative side, the tunnels put us in harm's way, but we also benefit from them because the crossings are close. There's no food or reconstruction or jobs. What are we supposed to do? The young men turn to this so they can get married, live, have children, and eat.
I asked her how prices had changed.
It is very expensive. Chicken is 23 shekels, turkey is 25, meat is 60. What do we do?
A tunnel supervisor, who didn't want his face on camera, said prices had to be high to keep the tunnels functioning.
Everything is expensive. We have to pay rent to the tunnel owner, and there are a lot of expenses to keep the system working. It has to be expensive. There's no official way into Gaza for items to be sold at regularized prices.
Indeed, the tunnels are now big business and constitute one of the only avenues for profitable investment.
Since the closure, which was imposed in Gaza in June 2007, 90% of the product that were available in Gaza market were coming through the tunnels. And I estimated the turnover of the tunnels around $30 to $40 million a month.
But Omar Shaban is critical of the kind of economy generated by the tunnels.
We are very angry to be seen by the international community as tunnel diggers. We are a nation looking for peace, for a state, not to dig tunnels. We were obliged to dig tunnels to obtain food for our children. Most of the Palestinians are against that because the tunnel has caused a huge damage to our economy and to social fabrics. Some people become rich in 2 weeks. Some kids make $1-2 million in 3 weeks. So the whole economy become informal economy. Usually black economy, 10%. The 90% is the legal one, registered, formal, pay taxes. But we have now 90% of our economy is a black market. We don't know who's bringing what and in what spaces, what the criteria. The main thing here about this tunnel will create a group of people who will be against any peace. Because peace means the end of the tunnel phenomenon. So the Israeli policy created some people in Gaza who are against the peace, against the truce.
We asked the tunnel supervisor how his work is affected by the unity talks between Hamas and Fatah and international efforts for a peace process.
If there's an agreement or a solution, or the crossings are open, then all of this will have to close down, of course. None of this will remain as you see it now. But perhaps the smuggling will never end in the world. Regardless of how much they try, it will not stop. There's always something to smuggle.
Putting a stop to cross-border smuggling into Gaza has become a key concern of the United States and other Western nations. Last month, the Obama administration pledged $900 million to rebuild Gaza on the condition that the Palestinian leadership renounce violence and recognize Israel's right to exist. Meanwhile, the U.S. has promised Israel $30 billion in aid over the next decade, 75% of which Israel must use to buy American military goods and services. Omar Shaban remains skeptical about the impact of aid pledged to Palestinians.
Mrs. Hillary Clinton knows exactly that the $900 million that the American government will help to extend Gaza and the West Bank, it wouldn't do any positive consequences unless the siege on Gaza is lifted. The siege on Gaza will not be lifted as long as Hamas is ruling Gaza. Hamas will not be will continue to rule Gaza unless the Palestinian divide is coming to its end. The $5 billion pledges of the international community to help in Gaza cannot flow into Gaza because Hamas is here. The international community would not deal with Hamas directly. The international community will deal with BA in Ramallah. BA in Ramallah has no physical presence in Gaza. The international community knows exactly this problem. So they have to work harder to bring the Palestinians together, to pressure Israel to stop the siege and to let the Palestinian economy operate.
Some would argue, however, that the Palestinian economy hasn't been allowed to operate for several years now. Israeli journalist Amira Haas says we have to go back to the 1990s, the decade of the Oslo peace process.
Israel started its policy of closure in '91, but it became more and more draconian and brutal when the PA, when the Palestinian Authority was established in '94. It went alongside it. And the main Israeli aim in that policy of closure was to separate Gaza from the West Bank, to disconnect the two. This implied that less Palestinians could find work in Israel or could have work in Israel. It, of course, affected their job opportunities here in Gaza. And it turned an entire people into beggars. We are talking about 1.5 million, excluding some bureaucrats and some politrooks. They are more dependent than ever on outside sources than on themselves. And this is how I see the devastation of Gaza. It's not the food that gets here. It's not the. It's their ability to decide about their life, even in. I mean, we don't live in a world where when people can really decide about their lives but there are degrees, and they are now in the bottom of this ladder of how much you can decide about your life. You can improve your life. You can develop. You can offer your children a better life than your own life.
While the people of Gaza try to rebuild their shattered lives, their primary demands are for the borders to be opened and guarantees that Israel will not destroy their homes and factories and farms once again. And many, like Abu Amar, the owner of the tile factory, don't want monetary or humanitarian aid from the international community, but solidarity in their struggle for justice and accountability.
We don't want to beg the world for money. We just want to take those who destroyed our houses to court. If we are really criminals and our houses are terrorist houses, then okay, this is what you get. But if our houses are innocent and our factories are innocent, then the Israelis need to account for what they destroyed. They're the ones who should give us the reparations. Why do we need to rely on the sympathy of the world? We don't want that. We want the world to stand by our rights. We don't want their charity, little bits of money and food. We're full, thank God. We're just asking for our rights, nothing else.
For Democracy Now!, this is Anjali Kamat with Jackie Suin, and special thanks to Hani Massoud.